Crimean War, indeed, I think, was the first war which was helped on by the newspapers.
I surrender!
This army has never done such fighting as it will do now. We will show the Yankees this time how we can fight.
No, sir. I have no love for war. Me neither. Even less for politicians.
David Lean has inspired so many American filmmakers. He puts pictures on the screen that not even our imaginations can anticipate.
Hey, give him some room. Where am I? Twin Peaks, Ben.
With the tribute to Sir David Lean at 10 o'clock, this is the new look to Saturday night on 2.
It's now just approaching 7:20, and time on 2 for news and sport.
Tonight's headlines: American Marines cross into northern Iraq to build safe havens for the Kurdish refugees. British troops fly out to help. Iraq is warned not to interfere. Good evening. Work has started on the first refugee camp in northern Iraq. Several hundred American Marines crossed the Turkey-Iraq border today and put up tents in the town of Zakho. The American general in charge of the task force has told senior Iraqi commanders to withdraw their troops from a 30-mile zone to make way for the operation.
American Special Forces are already operating inside northern Iraq. They're the advance party for the teams that will follow to build the camps and the communications for the bulk of the refugees still marooned in the mountains. Their medical teams can do some good, but their main task is to select the sites for the refugee camps. A BBC correspondent in the region says a helicopter-borne force of 500 Marines has now moved into northern Iraq to secure the first campsites.
There were at least 7 troop-carrying Chinook and Black Hawk helicopters, and they were escorted by a number of smaller helicopters, one of which fired decoy flares to divert any Iraqi missiles. Their destination was northern Iraq, 12 kilometers away, across the river that marks the boundary. There is now an established United States military presence on Iraqi soil.
The Americans have already made one armed foray into Iraq to escort their general to a conference with Iraq's military commanders. He told them to pull back their forces 30 miles from the border to give the Americans room to operate. The Iraqis are described as being furious with the order. The Americans now intend to build bridges and roads and establish supply lines which can remain independent of Iraqi control. The creation of this border zone will strengthen the hand of the Kurds. It's been revealed that one of the Kurdish leaders, Jalal Talabani, is in Baghdad, having talks on the future of Kurdistan. Saddam Hussein has offered autonomy to the region, but the Kurds are highly sceptical about whether he'll keep his word.
The first troops from Britain have left for northern Iraq to help with the relief effort. The men, Royal Marines, flew out from RAF Brize Norton this afternoon.
70 Royal Marines left this afternoon, the first part of Britain's contribution to Operation Haven. Their role is to build safe camps for the refugees and to guard them once they've been brought down from the mountains.
At one end, perhaps pure humanitarian work in setting up camps, distributing supplies and the like, and at the other end of the spectrum, actual military operations to protect them.
If I save one life, then at least it's been worth it, no matter what the cost is.
Few expect to be attacked by Saddam's forces, but they are prepared. They'll also receive air cover from the Americans. Once in Turkey, the men will be briefed by an advance team that spent the last week assessing exactly where in northern Iraq the camps will be built, how many there'll be, and the number of refugees they'll hold. The Marines will arrive in southeast Turkey later this evening. More will fly out in the next few days as the humanitarian effort gathers pace.
More food is now reaching the refugee camps in Turkey, and the weather is improving. But the Kurds' situation is still desperate. Water is polluted and disease is spreading quickly.
All they can do is watch while their relatives are buried. The grave diggers at Chikorja camp are as busy as they've been since the Kurdish refugees came to these mountains. The people have heard that relief is coming, but it's not getting here fast enough. There's no question that many lives have been saved. Much more food is being delivered to the camps. But the refugees ask how long it will take the Americans and their allies to move them to the protected areas in northern Iraq. So far, only a few US troops have come to the outlying camps, and the refugees don't understand why they've been delayed. While they wait, their living conditions are improving. Most of them have been given tents. A few latrines have been built. But the camps are still covered with human excrement. All the streams have been poisoned. One of the women drawing water for her family said she knew she should boil it, but didn't have a saucepan. She said she realized the water might kill them, but they had nothing else to drink. Disease is now the biggest danger to life here. It tears at them, sapping the strength of children who should be full of energy. The weakest refugees haven't been revived by a few days of warmer weather. The spring sunshine is helping infection to spread, and there's talk of epidemics. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, on the Turkey-Iraq border.
The Overseas Development Minister, Linda Chalker, has been visiting refugees on the Iranian side of the border after discussing the crisis with Iran's foreign minister. She's the first British minister to go to Tehran since the Shah was overthrown. She said both sides had agreed to work for the release of hostages taken in Lebanon.
Mrs. Chalker had 50 minutes of talks with the Iranian Foreign Minister, Dr. Ali Akbar Veliati, this morning, which both sides described as a good discussion. The main focus of the meeting was the continued plight of the 1.5 million Kurds, either in Iran or waiting in Iraq, to cross the mountain border. Mrs. Chalker later flew by helicopter to the border itself and talked to local Iranian relief workers about their specific needs. Afterwards, she said the British Red Cross would be providing the Iranian Red Crescent with a fully equipped field hospital for use close to the border. And she confirmed that the British government is considering the possibility of offering the Iranians up to 50 RAF helicopters to improve their supply operation. Stephen Sacker, BBC, Tehran.
Kurdish people living in Britain have thanked the Prime Minister for supporting the refugees. A delegation handed in a letter of thanks at Downing Street. The Kurds say Mr Major's safe haven plan will safeguard the lives of thousands of refugees stranded on Iraq's northern borders. They're now calling for a long-term political solution for Kurdistan that should be discussed by the United Nations. Police in Northern Ireland have discovered 9 incendiary devices on a bus that was travelling from Belfast to Cork. A man has been arrested. The devices were found when the bus was searched at a checkpoint at Middletown in County Armagh. Police in the Irish Republic warned shops to check their premises. A few hours later, a device was found in a Dublin store.
The security forces were carrying out a routine search of the Belfast to Cork Express at a border checkpoint when they found a rucksack that none of the passengers could identify.
Found a bag in the bus that nobody owned, was suspect. Searched it, it contained incendiary devices and questioned the passengers, so now we're letting us go on ahead.
Inside the rucksack were 9 cassette-type incendiaries, complete with batteries and timers. One man was later arrested. The IUC believed the firebombs were destined for attacks on shops in the Republic. The Irish police were alerted, and they warned stores around the country. 3 hours later, a similar incendiary was found in a bookshop in Dublin city centre. An army bomb disposal team made it safe. 2 months ago, 5 incendiaries were found in major stores in Dublin. Then the loyalist terror group, the UFF, said they were responsible.
The rock singer Steve Marriott has died in a fire at his cottage in Essex. He became famous in the 60s with the group The Small Faces. Steve Marriott's hits included Itchycoo Park. Police believe the fire was started accidentally by a cigarette. Now with news of the day's sport, David Davis.
Well, the race for football's league championship is still very much alive after Liverpool moved to within 3 points of the leaders Arsenal today. Ian Rush was among the scorers as Liverpool beat Norwich to give Graham Souness a winning start as their manager. Niall Quinn scored, then took over in goal, then saved a penalty as Manchester City beat relegated Derby. So at the top of the table, Arsenal lead Liverpool, having played the same number of games. Palace drew, while Manchester City's victory lifts them to 4th. Roy Keane scored twice as the FA Cup finalist Nottingham Forest overwhelmed Chelsea. At the bottom, Colin Pascoe's winner for Sunderland at Luton gave his club new hope of survival. Sunderland are now only 2 points behind Luton with a game in hand. With Derby relegated, their place in the First Division will be taken by West Ham. George Paris scored as they clinched promotion by beating Swindon. West Ham are assured of a top 3 spot, while Oldham looks certain to join them after beating Bristol City. In Scotland, a goal from substitute Sandy Robertson kept Rangers on top of the Premier Division by beating St Mirren. Rangers stayed 2 points clear of Aberdeen, who beat Motherwell 3-0. The top 2 meet on the last day of the season. The Spanish golfer Jose Rivero will have a 3-stroke lead going into the final round of the Benson and Hedges International at St Melian. Rivero shot a third-round 67 as more illustrious names continued to struggle.
Big names in big trouble. The St Melian story continued into today's third round. Nick Faldo scored an appalling 82, yet still kept his humour.
This is free relief. You just tell me where you want me to drop it and I'll drop it. I couldn't give a... Your nearest point should be...
He wasn't alone. David Fairtie's driving was about as good as Christy O'Connor's putting, yet amongst the poor play, in much improved conditions, there were some notable exceptions. Jose Rivero played the day's flawless round. His accuracy from tee to green was the key as he moved up on the overnight leader Philip Walton. His most memorable shot came at the 14th, but he finished disappointingly on level par, along with Bernhard Langer. The German got out of trouble almost as often as he found it, yet his putting was to let him down. 1 stroke ahead of him and Walton, Gordon Brand Jr., whose impact came late in the round with an eagle 3 on the 16th. But it was Rivero's day. This putt on the 17th put him 4 under, and when his delicate touch from just off the last green helped save his par, he knew that the tournament's best round, a 67, and a 3-stroke lead would be his.
In boxing, 42-year-old George Foreman believes he proved a point despite failing in his bid to win back the world heavyweight title. Foreman was outpointed by the champion, Evander Holyfield.
The idea was to show the whole world that you can dream, that you don't have to give up dreaming just because you become 40 and 45 and 50. I'm closer to 60 than I am to 25, but I showed the world that I could do it. Now, I was that close to becoming heavyweight champion of the world. Evander Holyfield, the only thing that stopped me is that's a great champion.
That's it for now. The main news tonight is at 20 to 10 on BBC One.
On the Record is back this Sunday. Our subject, children, teachers and schools. John Major says that education is top of his agenda. But what does that mean in practice? What are the government's plans and how will it foot the bill? We report from the front line and Secretary of State Ken Clarke goes on the record to make his case. That's tomorrow at 1:20 on BBC One.
Good evening. Over this coming week, the weather will continue to stay on the cold side. In fact, we'll be very lucky to see temperatures in southern parts of England any higher than 14, and over Scotland and Northern Ireland no higher than around 12. Well, it's still a fairly unsettled scene over many parts of the country today, especially the north and west, as frontal systems are working their way south, and that'll bring cloud and some rain to London for the marathon tomorrow, so it looks like a pretty dismal start there. Tonight, however, we'll find a band of clouds, some sleet and snow working its way down from the northwest, and then clear weather getting into many parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, to be followed by showers. But over East Anglia in the southeast, clear skies, that'll lead to a touch of frost, and here and there might be some slippery roads or some icy patches, but more especially associated with the snow and the high ground. Tomorrow we'll find many eastern, southern, southeastern and central southern areas fairly cloudy with some rain around, perhaps even some sleet too. But it'll become bright and sunny in many northern and western areas, but lots of showers over Scotland and Northern Ireland, and they'll become heavier and more frequent during the afternoon, perhaps even with some thunder, some hail, some sleet and some snow. But it will become brighter in central and southern parts. The top temperatures tomorrow around about 12, but for most places single figures.
The United Nations estimate that upwards of 7 million people in Sudan face starvation, more than 1/4 of the entire population. This is an official ceremony on government television to demonstrate that the Islamic Revolution has officially secured a bumper harvest.
Instead of great stooks of corn and threshing all over this land, there's this.
Too poor and too weak to leave their village, they wait all day in hope of passing charity. A few pence from the soldiers, while the regime they serve still insists that there is no famine in Sudan.
Jonathan Dimbleby's report from Sudan is followed by a studio discussion in Assignment, Tuesday, 7:30 on 2. The Civil War continues here on 2 in half an hour with the events surrounding the great Battle of Gettysburg. And now, the late A.J.P. Taylor gives another impromptu talk examining two contrasting 19th century wars to the east of the Atlantic in his series How Wars Begin.
In 1986, Unit 4 Chernobyl exploded, resulting in the world's worst nuclear accident. Over 100 tons of radioactive material is now entombed in a huge steel and concrete sarcophagus, buried by brave Soviets working with primitive equipment in areas of lethally high radiation. But the sarcophagus is crumbling, and while the contamination will last 100,000 years, the structure could last less than 7. Horizon sent the first Westerners to film the scientists who work in the deadly core of Chernobyl. Can they prevent a massive radiation leak? Horizon, Monday, 8:10 on 2.
The first showing on British network television for the Perry Mason feature-length film drama The Case of the Avenging Ace, in which he defends a US Air Force pilot accused of murder. That's in a couple of minutes on BBC1. Here on 2, in an hour, another visit to Sheffield on this opening day of the World Snooker Championship. Now, it's time for our epic documentary series on the American Civil War, with Episode 4, The Universe of Battle. If you'd like a free fact sheet, please send a stamped addressed envelope 9 inches by 12.5 inches to this address, The Civil War, P.O. Box 1991, Burgess Hill, RH 15, 8QY. Next week, America's women count the cost of the war, working in hospitals north and south. But in the wilderness, the killing continues. A new birth of freedom next Saturday night, again at 8:05.